Welcome to Comics League Dark. I am Jared, and I am here with the boys and our guest of honors here. What's up, William? How you doing,
wait
dude?
a minute. Wait a minute. You didn't tell me Talladega was going to be here.
Hey, by the way, William, I apologize. I did say
agreed. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I apologize for the other night.
Yeah, man. What else? You had internet issues, right?
Yeah, I did the issues. Yeah.
How you doing, dudes?
I'm doing all right. I'm just jumping all over the internet here tonight. So how you doing?
Hell yeah,
I know the feeling.
Hey, go see the Crow. Go be
all right.
See the Crow. Come get a T-shirt.
Oh yeah, exactly. So we're here to do an interview of William, and I guess I'll get started. So what got you into comics, man?
I grew up, believe it or not, that's how I learned how to refine my vocabulary when I was reading. There was only certain things that they teach you in school, and certain comic books had bigger letters that were in the same sentence structure that teachers were giving you softly to try to not overwhelm you. So when I would read these things and it was that, and then later on, a couple of years later, watching things like Transformers, Megatron would use big words, Zartan would use big words, Cobra Commander would use big words, and I would go look up those words. Same thing about Magneto, Professor X, all these characters. In order to have the most fun you were going to have these characters, you needed to understand what they were saying. So I use that as a way. And then, like I said, it was just a natural extension of what I'm science fiction, horror, fantasy, the things I surround myself with every day. So that's how I did it.
That's kind of similar to me. It's like because I was homeschooled my whole life, and my mom and I would show up, and my mom would be like, "Jared, where did you learn those words? Call of Duty, comic books, movies?" And she's like, "What the heck?" And I'm like, "Yes, the stuff that I waste my time with every day is actually good for me."
I shudder to think of the words you picked up playing Call of Duty.
No, it's not with the chat. It's not with the chat. Trust me. So much makes sense now. Thanks, Jay. So
Where's the lie?
Yeah, exactly. So the way I found you guys is actually because when I started doing YouTube, I got like really into, obviously it was during the whole Snyder Cut craze, and I was just watching everyone's stuff. And one of the things I really enjoyed, particularly during like the WB being their regular idiocracy, you were like one of the few people that was like calling him out saying, no, here's how it could happen. Here's how you monetarily benefit from continuing this universe.
Yeah. Now look where they're at, $7.80 stock.
And like $9 billion underwrote. I'm like, what the heck?
Which is borderline fraud.
Yeah, I know, right?
Turns out the hierarchy of the DC universe did change. That's the way they wanted it.
Too wordy, Nick. I appreciate the energy, but too wordy.
Yeah.
By the way, we want to say congratulations to William to reaching
over
1,000.
Hey, yeah. So,
we welcome to the 1K club, brother.
Yeah, no, man. The air is better up here. I mean, like I said, it's the one milestone, more on your way up that transforms your channel. So
yeah, exactly. What a lot of people told me when I was going through is that once you get to 1K, you start to grow like a lot faster because YouTube now takes your channel seriously. So I'm like, okay, now I'm here. Yeah, it makes you actually official. And then Nemo Strain says, I found you guys by chance when I started getting into comics. That's the purpose of this channel, is to get more people just reading the books.
Yep.
Because I feel like and William, you can probably go more into this. I think the problem with like DC and Marvel is that they do a lot of initiatives that actually end up turning people off to comics.
Well, the biggest problem mainly with DC recently is continuity issues.
Yeah.
If you look at from 1986 to now, they've been nothing but a continuity disaster. People love continuity. They want that comfort zone. They want to know that their dollar is going to be extended beyond what you're paying for right now. So if I buy,
but lore doesn't matter. Lore is nothing. It's modern day.
No, it's not even. It's not even lore. It's not even lore. It's continuity. It's reliability. So in 1986, you blew up the timeline because you thought your fan was too stupid to understand Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth 3. So that's why they did it, and they did it. A bunch of egos got together. They did that immediately after Crisis. They started to undo Crisis. You had things like Zero Hour. You had things like all these other things that basically Infinite Crisis that undid. The universe. What you do every time you do that is for every 7 years, you're breaking up the continuity. So you're not giving that fan a lot to invest in. If they know that you're just going to blow it up, they're not going to hang around.
But let me ask you this. As a bit of a counterpoint, what do you say to people who maybe find that continuity too intimidating to hop into comics?
Here's the thing. There are ways to do that without blowing up the continuity.
Okay.
I'll give you a prime example. Green Lantern had been around for what, 35, 40 years before they changed the Green Lantern. The book was dying. Nobody was interested in it. Young people weren't buying the book. All right. But somehow we found a way not to reset Green Lantern's timeline and reinvigorate the book by giving you Kyle Rayner, who basically tripled the sales of the book and kept it alive so that Jeff Johns could even do anything with it 16 years later. Another thing is Spider-Man. When you look at Miles Morales, I don't have to blow up the establishment of Spider-Man to get other people involved into the IP, into the title. There's a lot of things you can do. It's lazy. It's what it is. It's lazy. I want to do things with my own signature and the only signature being mine. And I don't want to have to think these stories out. So that's the problem primarily with DC. Marvel had the same problem for a little bit, but mainly Marvel does fine. It's just that a lot of what the problem that Marvel has is the majority of the people who are picking up their comics now are being brought in through limited ways. You only have the movies for some of these guys, if they're even buying it all. And the movies don't cover every single thing.
Yeah.
The movies cover 8% of all Marvel characters. So what are you selling if that's where you're growing your fan base? So
What do you want to ask, Jay Heat?
Yes. First of all, William, big fan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
But before I say anything, and I'm a bit of a comics expert myself. Even with my channel, I get fan requests all the time. But to make it a long story short, I feel like you would have a better way of explaining this than me. How would you break down, like, okay, how can I because I never name people who ask me. I try to keep it anonymous. But a fan asked me, what is the best way to develop or highlight a character, say Miles Morales, for example, without bringing a pre-established character down or down a peg to prop the new character up? Because you brought up two great examples, Hal Jordan to Kyle Rayner and Peter to Miles. And you got to understand, at least from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Hal Jordan went through the Parallax Saga before the retcon to where he was at the time considered blatant.
They killed him. He died.
They straight up killed him.
Yeah. But here's the thing that sometimes you cannot do that. Because what ends up happening, the reason why you make that change in the Hal Jordan situation is the character, you're not knocking the character down. He's already down. I was open then. I was open in 95 when they did that, 94, 95 when they did that. You couldn't give away a Green Lantern comic until Emerald Twilight came around. You couldn't give it away. No one was buying it. So the character is already down. So you're not really hurting Hal Jordan's legacy other than the books getting canceled one after another because nobody's buying the book. So when you bring Hal Jordan in, you're kind of bringing a highlight to all the Green Lantern cores. Now, you can do it in Spider-Man. They did do it because Peter Parker didn't go down. They didn't put him down. Miles Morales just had a more appealing demographic because, like I said, being of color, we got like 3 or 4, I can count them on one hand, of highlighted characters. So that alone elevates Miles Morales to something else. The thing about Peter Parker, though, is you've saturated and you've developed a character to the point where he's grown away from what made Spider-Man appealing to that demo. And so when Miles Morales comes in and reclaims that demo, that's why the spotlight's on him. But Spider-Man's relatability is the exact same thing Miles Morales has right now. The anonymity, he can only trust a handful of people, and he's a young, awkward kid. That's what made Spider-Man what he was back in the 60s, 70s. But it's grown away from a brand new demographic. A brand new kid, 15, 16 to 25 years old, is not going to find today's Spider-Man appealing to him for those reasons. And you got to have those reasons if you're going to bring in new people.
So it's almost like one thing I've been saying, and Jared, you can back me up on this, is that Miles should cover like the young Spider-Man antics, and that Peter could be for the older stuff, like Peter gets married with MJ and whatnot, whereas Miles has like all the teenager, your young stuff.
You could say that, but what you're doing, you got to realize it's a generational thing for a lot of people. A lot of these big hobbies are handed down by the generations, so you don't want to lose. I mean, you should still be wanting to appeal from both. With Spider-Man, unfortunately, they just got to write better stories.
True.
The biggest problem with Spider-Man is the stories just aren't compelling anymore, and the fact that they floated around. There's no more that awe and curiosity of him and his rogues gallery. It's they've done too many things that just become standard fare and easy just to move away from. It's no longer a marquee book. It doesn't look like a marquee book. It doesn't read like a marquee book. So they got to change that. You know, but
And
that you know, they can do that.
Do you feel like main continuity Spider-Man? The writers keep teasing the Spider-Man MJ relationship, like the stuff like what Zeb Wells is doing with like Paul. We're like, oh no, they can't be together, but we're gonna hint at it.
I don't think enough people are reading for that to matter in a lot of cases. It's not necessarily like, okay, I'll give you an example for when the stories are no longer to the point where they're must read. Like the Hobgoblin. The perfect storyline is when the Hobgoblin was introduced.
I
The
agree.
perfect pacing of a story, the old Spider-Man story that used to get you going, used to be that you find a villain, you don't know everything about him, and as you build, he does the detective work and you escalate. They escalated the Hobgoblin story over the course of 3.5 years before it met its climax, and it still had roads on it. That changed for Spider-Man in the 90s. And be honest with you, as much as people love like things like Venom and Carnage, you may love them as characters, but you look at the storyline structure from 1989 through 1994. It's some of the worst storytelling that Spider-Man bit out, but it sold a lot because you had a sensationalized character. That wasn't what Spider-Man's about.
Here's the other thing. See, what 89 to 94, what you just said kind of lines up perfectly with like comic boom era of the rockstar artists that I tend to like talk about a lot. Where I feel like people who didn't grow up in that area, they tend to glamorize it, and I feel like history is kind of repeating itself in the indie market a little bit.
To an extent, I see where you're coming from, Nick. That's to an extent, but I feel like what you have to realize that with any medium, and William, I hope you feel free to correct me or add more to.
Yeah, I'm trying not to speak over William because he has experience, he lived it, so he's welcome to correct anything I say.
But I feel like the more you appeal to these characters, you're always going to have flanderization. You're always going to have generational clashes. There's always going to be a back and forth. And with new writers, if you're actually going to get these characters to stick and hold their own, one, you got to improve the storytelling. Two, you got to have a balance between character consistency and intrigue. And you're just not seeing that anymore. No. With Marvel, they're not even bothering because they got the momentum from the MCU, with diminishing returns included. And DC, they've been trucking the same. Okay, let's fix up the continuity. Let's do all this and that every 7 years. Just tell a good story, build character investment, decent storytelling, and keep it engaging. I'm not saying write the Taj Mahal or write the Book of Omen, but just give people something to invest in.
Yeah, what they need to know that the ground that they're standing on, as far as a collector, is solid and it's not going to be pulled out from under them. That's been DC's biggest problem. Marvel, like I said, when it comes to Marvel, the way stories are written these days are, like I said, it's a shock and awe type of deal to where it's not a build anymore. For some of their books, there are exceptions though, because Daredevil has done that. Daredevil does that. Miles Morales does that. I mean, there's titles I can go over to the shelf right now, and they're doing it. But it used to be a discipline company wide. Now it's hit or miss, and that affects the sales. When, like I said, in the internet era, and another thing you have is you don't have the ability to hold the attention of today's market like you did back in the day. Where, I mean, when I first started collecting, it was comic books. You didn't have internet, you didn't have PlayStation, you didn't have any of those things. So you had to wait. You had to build enough lineage between the 5 or 6 books you could afford to buy and hope those carried you over. Now, if they figure that everything has to be a big nuclear explosion because they're competing with the internet, they're competing with TikTok, they're competing. So a lot of the new storytelling is to try to keep in line with that. But when it's a comic book, it's a different thing because once every 30 days in some cases. And it's not just the story; it's the value of the comic, it's the value of the moment. And like I said, it's with DC, it's two different things. DC's continuity blow up, hurt that on all levels of DC, by the way. And then Marvel, it's just the fact that they just don't have the audience type that they've had. They have the audience; it's a different audience. And sometimes you have to burn your soul just to get them to buy anything.
Well, what do you think?
Sorry.
What do you think also of DC establishing like a side continuity, like the absolute universe, essentially trying to do what Marvel did with the Ultimate Universe?
Well, okay, here's the thing though. Marvel, the multiverse was created by DC. So anything done with multiverse, it was copied by if the Ultimate Universe and all that. That was
Suck it, Marvel.
That was
finished.
That was
Flash in 2 worlds
by what was undone by the crisis, by Earth 1s, Earth 2s, Earth 3s, different circumstances leading to different outcomes, leading to different Earths. So what happened is DC abandoned that, and then Marvel established it. What he's doing, what Scott Snyder's doing right now, is what, in my opinion, the mentality of DC, whether it be video games, motion pictures, and television series, that needs to adapt. I am not a believer of the one universe at a time thing. I think that's complete bullshit.
It's stupid.
Think that it is you're really taking away most of the advantages that you have from being around for 85 years by limiting things and not catering to the dimensions of your fan base that have grown over 8.5 decades. So what they're doing right now is what they should have been doing a long time ago.
Well, the other thing is like, let me answer this, and then I'll let you go, July. The idea is that definitely applies to the movies, because I see like they're talking about they're going all in on the James Gunn stuff, and I'm like, hey, that's fine. You could have a main James Gunn universe, but then you also say, no, we're not going to continue Zack stuff. We're gonna get rid of My Adventure with Superman. But I mean, they're going to get rid of Superman and Lois because they think the audience. They think the audience can't differentiate between like Henry Cavill and Tyler Hoechlin. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the audience is going to know that Henry Cavill is a different Superman.
And
it's a generic mindset, and it's where they have failed. And I'd say as long as we have the one universe at a time, we're basically having these conversations until we get the next ownerships and people, because you're insulting your fan by saying that, well, let James Gunn do his thing and not have anything else going on. Okay, here this, and I'm in retail. That's horrible. You're basically saying that if I don't like the one thing that you put on my plate, that I can't look at the menu again, and you still keep my money. So if I don't like a version of the character you put out, I gotta wait 6 or 7 years for your time to run out. So you don't want my money in that interim. So I think retail wise, that's suicide. That's stupid. When it comes to these things, and I'm not the biggest fan of Superman and Lois. But I don't believe that it should go away, because here's the assumption they're making. They're basically making an assumption that if I take away all your other options, you're automatically going to choose mine. Yeah. And that's not going to happen in a lot of cases. A lot of cases, that's going to increase the possibility that they just maybe walk away from everything, which is what has happened in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, because it's like you said earlier, comic books have more competition for their attention than everything else. There's video game, YouTube, television. So if comic books aren't delivering what people want, they're like, oh, well, there's like 15 other things I could spend my time or attention on. I'll just go do that.
And I do want to quickly respond to Lottie. I hate to cut you off. I just want to quickly respond to this. See, the most popular example, I ought to say, is the bad embargo. Okay, we got Christopher Nolan, his projects going on. We got so much momentum. We're making so much bank. We can't afford any distractions, anything to trim the fat. Okay, that makes sense in the confines of a business decision and changing intergenerational demographics. But it does not.
No, it's dumb. And a lot of smart people that you just brought up made a dumb decision. If you're in retail, this is one thing. First thing I learned: if you limit options, you limit income.
Yeah.
When you limit options, you limit revenue. That's an egotistical thing, saying like when George Miller and all these guys wanted to do that and he shut them down. I got my thing. I don't want anybody distracting. You got to think about that. You're calling your customer a single-minded dummy when you do that. If you're, and then when they bring out the confusion angle, well, this is going to confuse this guy. That's okay. So in order for that to happen, two things have to be the case, and they are not. Your storyteller has to be a fucking moron. Sorry. Or your reader, your audience has to be a moron. I observed that neither of those are the case. So they're not even getting the chance to discern these things. We just put 2 giant lizards out there within 4 months of each other.
Yeah.
Both named Godzilla. Nobody got confused. They both did well. we don't need scratch and sniff from the production companies. We can
Or
figure
it's
this
like,
stuff out.
or it's like, remember, we
I
got
didn't mean to cut you off, dude. I don't know your name.
No,
I didn't mean to cut you.
Jay Heat, but I
Jay
appreciate
Heat.
it.
Or it's like we got Matt Reeves, the Batman, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. No one thought Matt Reeves was the same Batman as Ben Affleck.
Or,
So, like,
or we got
it doesn't apply.
We got Superman on the big screen, though. Got Superman on the small screen.
Yeah, but even though people were watching the Flash for for the people who were watching the Flash, nobody confused that what was happening on the thing. Fans aren't stupid, and if you want people's money, you can always say that you have to understand what you're selling them. I mean, you can't on one hand call fans dumb enough not to figure out multiple versions of characters and then want them to buy anything, because you literally would have to be illiterate to be confused by that. The storyteller's job is to make sure that doesn't happen anyway. So if you have a competent storyteller, that's not going to happen. If you have a competent organization, that's where it starts. So whenever I hear about we shouldn't have another so-and-so while this guy's doing this, that's bullshit. That is the recipe for failure.
Thank you.
That is the recipe for failure.
100%. And what I always tell those people is like, if it competes with James Gunn's universe, because that's what I hear a lot, is that James Gunn does not want it because it's going to overshadow his stuff. I'm like, what difference does it make? You still get the money, bro.
Yeah. James Gunn, for all the talent he has, he's not that. He's a studio head of DC. Somebody at Warner Brothers needs to be the one to make that kind of decision anyway. But as far as competing, like I said, does Detective Comics compete with DC Black Label over here? No. You're either going to be one of two minds. You're either going to cross-pollinate to where you're just a Batman fan, you're going to gobble up anything, which means the competition is done. Or if I was never going to buy your thing anyway, even if it sat on the shelf by itself. So by eliminating the other option, that's not competition. That's stupidity. Once again, limiting options limits revenue. But
Warner Brothers being stupid?
Well, and a lot of fans buy into that nonsense.
Oh yeah, yes, true, yeah.
But you have people who are not connected to the IP that are at executive type levels. You have guys like that have been running the company for the last who do not understand the IP and the way IP works. No, that's why I say none of these companies are going to reach their zenith until the baby boomers leave and the Generation Xers come in. The next guy who runs DC or runs Warner Brothers needs to be 56 or less. He needs to be a Generation X or a millennial.
Well, the problem with a lot of people in comics is comics used to be like the end goal. Like the end goal of your career was to work for Marvel or DC. Now it's like it's a transitionary thing. Like, oh, I'm going to go work for Marvel and DC for like 3 or 4 years. Then I'm going to go work for Vanity Fair, or I'm going to go work in Hollywood. It's so people don't have as much of an incentive to be as good custodians. They're just like, all right, let's go and break some stuff and then move on.
The stepping stone.
That's what you have bosses for, though. You have bosses that organize that, because you've always had writers and different content creators that would just put out spaghetti. It's up to the chef, the CEO, the chief editor to make it all work. The problem right now is that you see those other things, so they're prevalent, but you still have, like I said, Scott Snyder's still around. You still have a lot of Tom King. You still have a lot of people that can make compelling stories. It's just that the companies that run them don't support it and do right by everybody under them. That's now, true. Warner Brothers needs a different ownership. They need somebody who has experienced media the way a Generation X or millennial would be, because right now you have an old guy pushing 65 that these are just numbers to him. These are just, he knew James Gunn because of what he did in Marvel. He probably didn't even see Guardians of the Galaxy. He knows these things by name. You need somebody who's actually experiencing these things, experiencing social media, experiencing diversity that a 55 or 45 or 35 person. And if you understood it through those eyes, you're not gonna ever say that we can only do this one thing at a time. If you're experiencing things to a Generation X or a millennial or below, you are never going to say anything that dumb. It's these old school guys, because that's the way their minds have always worked.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Taladia.
So I had two things. Firstly, William, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about DC's Absolute Universe's covers from Jim Lee that was recently posted?
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
It's Jim Lee.
Yeah, Jim Lee. The one thing he knows how to do. One thing he can't mess up.
Yeah. And the second thing is, William, how do you feel about WBD recently saying, they want to license out IPs now for in the video game space, and the fact that do you think that this could be also a stepping stone that they could do for maybe for television, maybe for film in the future?
Maybe to another streaming service to continue the Snyderverse.
This has always been an eventuality. This is
Mhm.
not a surprise. Common sense. If you have common sense, you had to see this coming. I'm not trying to call everybody stupid, but I know
no.
our show.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
On our show, we've had to fight, people who basically just echoed some stupid shit they heard from another YouTuber, basically saying that, well, they would never sell to this or they would never do that. I don't know if you've ever been behind a counter of something, or you've never had to pay for something, or you've never had to buy something. When you say never, when it involves a possible transaction, you're a fucking moron.
Yeah,
all right?
exactly.
That's all there is to it. When you say never, when there's money to be,
exactly.
You're an absolute fool, and no one should listen to you.
But particularly when you're dealing with like David Zaslav, who's known for being a money guy and who's known for looking for options to make money. So if people come to him and say, "Hey, let us make these things, and we'll pay you for it," why wouldn't he say yes to that?
Yeah, like that sounds like David Zaslav's dream.
Well,
Like,
anybody's dream.
Yeah.
Wait. So you're telling me that I don't have to do anything? And you will pay me to make the stuff on my behalf, and I don't have to do anything. And you still pay me, and I get the prestige. Like that is that like sorry.
Yeah, because it's a licensing agreement. See, as the owner of the IP, you will always own the IP. If you own the IP, you own the distribution rights, which means you're going to come out on top 9 out of 10. It's really hard to lose money right there. So if Amazon came to and license, like they did with Batman Crusader, if they came to me, they're assuming the liability. They are paying you a fee. You still own the likenesses. So if anything ever branches off from that IP, they start making Cape Crusader toys and all that. You get the lion's share of all that. If there's ever a theater or theatrical agreement, you're covered. You're the distributor. So you could always have your own studio right now. You could still be doing what James Gunn is doing and still be doing these things. What I always hear, well, that James Gunn will never allow that. First of all, you need to look at what the corporate structure is and see where James Gunn is. And there's 3 levels of people above him.
I know.
So that's out.
I kind of blame that on kind of James Gunn, because he kind of represented his position like, oh yeah, the DC Studios is separate from Warner Brothers. I'm like, no, it's not. They own the IP.
Okay. In a sense, he's correct, but in the corporate structure. So if I was going to talk about licensing, licensing doesn't happen by studio heads. That happens by corporate level because it's property. Yeah. Legally, you can only do it that way. So you could have James Gunn's DCEU, but I don't want to put on my if I'm trying to build the diversity of the company and build a whole brand audience, I can't be putting all my eggs in one basket. And then with the infrequently of way movies are produced, I got HBO Max I could be marketing on. I got 2 different TV stations. I got TBS. I got TNN. I got all these different platforms, and I'm sitting around waiting and hoping that one guy's version of a character, which some people it may not be for them, no matter what, might not go with. So if I got Superman money out there, do I just wait another 10 years to make that money? No. I mean, there are other platforms that you could exploit these things on. And like I said, what annoyed me was like I said, I think the sale disaster, I think that was misleading because you're not selling anything. You'd be licensing anything. But I thought the pushback from that was literally by people, in my opinion, who literally were just listening to the loudest YouTuber
that's what it is.
Because
this happens all the time with the Arrowverse, the CW shows are literally a licensing agreement.
Oh yeah, and you want to talk about like listening to content creators were in the show. Arrow is a perfect example of that. Like Arrow, and Arrow was ruined because they kept listening to the Elicity shippers. You know, sorry. Go ahead.
No, if you know how I feel about CW. Arrow, Arrow. See, the thing is, the CW is a partnership between Paramount. So they actually owned those IPs. They didn't have to license them out. They just had to syndicate them out, which is fine. The problem with the CW is nobody was watching the network. It wasn't drawing revenue. It wasn't drawing ad dollars, which means you basically now you're looking at a situation. That's how you turn a $74 billion company into one that sold for $43 billion and that much more in debt. Those kind of decisions. If I had been running the CW gets blown up the moment I step into the office. It gets obliterated because it's not making any money. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's dead weight.
So, so William,
Wait. And they literally said it never made money. That's the thing.
Never made a profit.
I'm like,
William,
Never made a profit.
is it safe to say that you are inevitable?
Nick, stop with the puns.
No.
But that's a good point because I'm like, wait a second, if it's never made money, how did that thing last as long as it did? How did no one with any business sense go, you're not making money, get out?
I can go ahead and explain that.
Both companies formed that. They formed that because UPN was dying and in debt, and at that time, the WB was dying and it was in debt. So they merged it to absorb tax losses. So whenever they would hide losses. So say if one of the companies had a big year and they say, "Ooh, we don't want to pay that kind of taxes." Oh, wait a minute, I got Smallville running with 8 people across the nation watching it, and it's losing money, and I can't draw any avenue from it. Oh, look at my data sheets for my revenue draws from the local cable networks. They're at 0. So, but I spent this much money and, making these shows, no matter what the differential is, I still took a loss. You can't harm me with my bag of money over here. Cause look at this loss I took it. It was just, to me, I won't say money laundering because that's criminal, but they basically used it to hide losses, hide losses and absorb wins.
The CW did make some money. Like, for a while there, they had a bit of a cottage industry where like they'd license their content out to stuff like Netflix and whatnot, and they made a little bit of money that way. I'm not saying
not enough to garner a profit. Not
enough to justify their existence, other than basically a tax write-off, is what it was.
I agree, but it felt like to me like you're saying like CW made like no money.
No money. No, I am. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They didn't make
all right. I respect your bluntness. I respect it.
With that money that went back there, that money never went back to CW. That money went to the overall WBD patch and hide fund. So they never put in. There was no money to put into the CW. That's why it looks like it does. And credit those people who ran that channel and Blanche and all those guys. They did a lot with nothing.
They did,
but
they did.
It is what it is.
Yeah, like they had some good landmark shows like Smallville, Gossip Girl, River. Like you may not like these shows.
Look at William.
I could see him literally dying inside.
He's like, oh my gosh, who is this Feed Express dude?
I got valuable stuff I don't want to throw up.
But it's safe to say that these are shows that people enjoy.
A low number of people, but go ahead, Talani, what do you want to say?
They'll need to get their heads checked, but
I was going to say that I find it funny that CW started with Smallville, which is Superman show, and it ends with the Superman show. Literally,
did it already end? Didn't they already kill the company?
The CW started with season 5. I think it's season 5 of Smallville. And also the other thing, because when the CW started, they brought over like the shows that were popular on WB and mostly WB and UPN. Like for example, Supernatural season 1 was on the UPN. A lot of people don't realize that, but the first season of Supernatural was on the WB.
But so does anyone have any other questions that they want to bring up? Anything they want to talk about? But William, so here's the thing that I really want to ask you. Do you think a sale of WB is inevitable at this point?
A sale,
and if so, real quick, say WB is sold again or like is split up again. What do you think happens to James Gunn and DC Studios at that point?
See, it's hard to say. But if you go by precedent, it depends on who purchases them. If it's just a hedge fund person who doesn't care about the details, they may not mess with James Gunn because they don't have the knowledge or wherewithal.
Well, here's my question for you. Follow up. Who do you think will purchase it?
The second part of his question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If it's somebody with a vision. If it's somebody who's gathering the money that's wanting to buy this because they have a vision for what they can do with the company and that IP, then I would say yes, James Gunn's universe would drastically be affected. How and how soon is hard to say. They could come in and they could take a look at it and slowly integrate themselves into the workings of that company to where whatever he had planned becomes what their plan, and they have a little bit more oversight. They start introducing things that way the one, or if it is in Amazon or if it's somebody who has different platforms, they could just come in and say, you know what, continue to do your things on the big screen, but we need something on our Amazon Prime. We need something here. So you may see them diversify. And whereas like Amazon is not worried about confusing their customers. They know.
No.
So if it's Amazon, Apple, or Microsoft, I don't know what happened to my camera. If it's Amazon or Microsoft is one of those big companies that, hover near the $1 trillion, then that's one thing. If it's a smaller studio that they merge with, who knows? It depends on who the gaining company is.
What about Universal?
The thing. What's up?
I was saying how it just depends largely.
Yeah, it just depends, because here's the thing though. Like I said, it depends on if you are taking over a company, you're doing it because you probably think you can do a better job than who's ever sitting in the captain's chair. So even if you like James Gunn, even if you love what he's doing, you got your people that you helped build this cell with. Those are the people that you're going to come in with. You trust those people. So those are going to be the people you put into these spots. And if you value DC as that kind of IP, people think, well, if James Gunn is doing well, they're just not going to come in and change everything. We're literally having this conversation because somebody came in and changed everything.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. So, it all depends on who buys it.
Speaking of coming in and changing everything, now, as a retailer, as a professional,
here we go.
I just have to, because I get requested this all the time and I'm sick of talking about it. Do you believe 5G was salvageable from a business
DC
standpoint?
5G, because remember that initiative they wanted to do in 2020 when like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman were all dead, and now it's their kids that are taking over the mantle.
No. And
thank you.
And I'm gonna say an unpopular opinion here.
Oh, okay.
All right, it's the same thing. While you will not currently, anytime near future, get things like a Batman Beyond movie or a Jonathan Kent Son of Superman movie, if you don't, you cannot just create an initiative without doing the work to get people to recognize these characters apart from what the legends they are. Batman to the general public, which is 98% of your revenue, is Bruce Wayne, will always Bruce Wayne.
Yes!
Unless you can do a Batman Beyond movie, you can do a Jonathan Kent movie, but you have to do the same thing that they did with Miles Morales, which is the work. The 7 years, 8 years, 9 years of getting people to respect the existence of that character aside from their legacy. For Spider-Man, before 2011, Spider-Man was always going to be Peter Parker. But the way Miles Morales has been handled on several different formats has endeared people to the point where they are ready now for a Spider-Man that would not be Peter Parker. You haven't done that work with any of those characters that they were trying to do with that initiative.
And then the whole idea about them, like, because DC had this really stupid idea where they were like, how about there's two Aquaman? We'll call the book Aquaman. And I'm like, no.
You listen, you can get to that point. You just cannot just wake up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Rush it.
Yeah, you have to establish, like I said, Miles Morales has been around since 2011. We're now 13 years of building him. There still hasn't been a live action Miles Morales movie. But by the time you get to one, you have put him in front of people and got him recognizable as that legacy character, but not Peter Parker. That takes time. When you do these switches or you bring in, like I said, even though Batman Beyond came out years and years ago, it got 3 seasons and the general public wouldn't know it if it hit him on the head like a boomerang. So you would have to establish, A, that's Batman, and B, over time and over frequency, that this is Terry McGinnis, this is Batman, over and over again, and you'd have to do it on several levels. There's not enough frequency out there to do those type of things with these characters with that kind of initiative. So for right now, Clark Kent is Superman, Bruce Wayne is Batman, so on. That's just, not saying it can't happen, but you just can't do it the way they were going to do it.
And then Britt brings up an interesting question. She goes, what's your perspective on the new 52? Should DC have stuck with it instead of backpedaling, ending up in the same position that caused the reboot in the first place?
No, I would rather eat wet dog food than relive the new 52.
Thank you.
The New 52 and Rebirth were what I was explaining before when you're blowing up your continuity.
Mhm.
Where they were at before, you know where they're at before? We're just needing to improve the stories and the writing. You can do these things. You can revolutionize these books without blowing everything up.
Mhm.
It's been done before.
Mhm.
It's been done with, I mean, look at all the major titles that have been successful.
Mhm.
You know, you've done the legacy numbers, so I'm still looking at 700 if all it says is number one, but you know that's
Mhm.
bullshit. But for the
Mhm.
most part, these comics have been around, and they haven't had to do all that. There are ways to do this without sacrificing your continuity. Continuity is cash. Once you sacrifice continuity, you basically tell your customer that their time and their money over a certain period of time doesn't mean shit.
Mhm.
And that's what hurts them in the in the
Long
movies
run.
as well. That's what no matter how James Gunn, there's gonna be a lot of people, a lot of average fans that are just gonna be like, you know what happened to that last storyline I invested in? And when they don't have an answer, they're gonna sit out a couple of rounds here.
Particularly when here's the interesting thing. I'm glad we got the Snyder cut, but if DC wanted to really go away from what Zack Snyder wanted to do, they shouldn't have released the Snyder cut.
No. Here's the thing. Resolution is what you needed to do. Continuity.
yeah.
Continuity. What they should have done once they decided, you know what? I don't mind as much them going in their own different direction. That's fine. But I always say this on our show: wrecked runways lead to crash planes.
Mhm.
You cannot think that you're going to get a beautiful brand new Airbus or 747 jet off the ground when your runway is littered and cratered with the stuff that you just refuse to deal with.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to get that up in the air, that's fine. I would be right behind you. But you need to resolve things. You can't have things, not just for guys like me who are bought into that, but for your brand new fan who's coming into your house. You want somebody coming into a house with everything organized and tied together, or you want them coming in with the faucets ripped out, the trash is all over the place. And that's what DC is to a new prospective buyer. You look at it because its lineage is so fucked up. You just look at some other things that are easier to jump onto, and you go to those things. So what they should have done is resolve the storyline. Even if they had to resolve it in an abbreviated fashion, I didn't need Justice League 5, 10, 20. I didn't need all that. All I wanted you to do literally is give those characters a satisfying ending. And marketability-wise, you and James Gunn and all these people should have been sitting down. One universe ends, the other begins. You could have been selling James Gunn's universe for the last 2 years instead of some of the stuff that they've done, which is not just turned off hardcore people, but hasn't turned on the 97% that they're going to need to make these things successful.
Clashing egos and 7 years of bad business decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is because what people have to understand is that Twitter does not represent the world. So when people say, "Oh, it's very popular on Twitter," like the new Superman suit is popular on Twitter, I'm like, it's Twitter. But the other thing is, like, when you look at like what Zack's original plans wasn't it going to end in Flashpoint? So you can literally just end it there, and then it just goes into the next universe. That's how Flashpoint actually ended, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean that's but once again, when you don't have people who understand the IP, they are reactionary. You have a lot of it going on. Like I said, whenever you have these expensive IPs and you react the way some of these companies do, you're telling me that you don't even need to be in charge of those IPs. And the people that were in charge of the DC IP from maybe 15 on had no business near those IPs. They may not have been awful people, but not one of those people were the right person for their job. Ann Sarnoff wasn't the right person for her job. Kevin Tisciara was an absolute fucking disaster.
I agree.
What's his face? Walter Amato wasn't a bad person. He has a great rep as a producer in Hollywood. He just wasn't the right guy to run DC. So you have to start out with getting the right people who can have a long view. And that's the one thing that Kevin Feige is. You're never going to have another guy like his because he came up while these things were forming. But you can have a guy that takes a look at the IPs and sees their effects on people and talks to people and understands the business end of things and the emotional end of things, who has a good feel for the post. DC, and you have James Gunn now, who I think by accident they ended up getting the right guy. But
complete accident.
The process used to get James Gunn tells you everything you need to know about why Warner Brothers Discovery is where they're at now.
But I think the problem with Gunn is that he's emphasizing a bunch of D-list characters instead of emphasizing the characters that DC has, that everyone knows when they think of DC first. And then you get to like Creature Commandos, Booster Gold. There should be a Wonder Woman movie or instead of like Paradise Lost, where it actually features Diana at this point.
Yeah,
I mean,
I could sort of agree with that, but here's the thing, though. It wouldn't be so bad if that wasn't the only game in town.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more willing to give you
the
benefit of the doubt with some of these other things if I know that I have room to go somewhere within your universes if I don't necessarily want to buy into that immediately. And you know what? Retail value shows that eventually either you have variety. A lot of times the majority of your customers are going to sample everything else. I got people who buy Detective Comics and came in saying, DC Black Label, that's too rough. They showed Batman's dick in there. I can't read that, But guess what? 6 months later, they keep passing it. And finally they pick it up and they like it. So once you have an IP like that and you give diversity within the IP, a lot of times you're going to have crossover audience. So if I don't like what they're doing with the DCU, and I think that I don't care about Metamorpho, because to be honest with you, this is starting to look like Justice League International. Rest in peace, Keith Giffen. You are a goat. But there are two things that he did that I cannot stand: JLI and the creation of the poor man's Wolverine in space. That's Lobo. That's my preference. But so I stopped collecting, that particular title when I see Metamorpho, come in, or the Elongated man come in, or Crimson Fox, or if I see Guy Gardner as your Green Lantern on the team, that's where it was time for me to close up the book and put it down. And because it was probably about to get canceled. But you know what? Let somebody else enjoy it. This iteration of it, just based on the characters that might be around it, it may not be for me. But here's the thing: I still have money to spend. So you're just going to keep me on the sideline if this is not the one for me? You're not going to use your other platforms? You're not going to use HBO Max? You're not going to use some of these other platforms to try to pry my money away? You're going to hope and pray that, I come around? I mean, you only giving me that one thing. That's why I say with Superman and Lois, once that got out that was their reasoning, that's just dumb.
Yeah.
If even if it wasn't, that should never get out, because you're basically saying you like this thing. I don't trust you.
It was
like
popular too.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Superman and Lois was like losing money. It was doing well.
No, it was the first thing that they had that people bought ad revenue for.
Yeah.
Too little, too late, but yeah.
But even on that, it's like my concern when I see James Gunn announcing like all these like Creature Commandos and all that stuff and starting with the universe is that I keep flashing back to when Blue Beetle was coming out. And no one showed up because I didn't know who Blue Beetle was.
Here's the thing, though. I'll give them a little bit of defense for this. The previous regimes were just a bunch of fucktards. You can use the B-listers and C-listers. I don't mind them being there. What DC was doing, because they had fucked things up with Snyder and all that, they had made those characters toxic that they couldn't even want to touch them. So what they did is they used their D-listers instead of their A-listers.
Okay, I see.
When you're doing it right, you're using your D-listers and your Z-listers in support of your A-listers and vice versa. So when you're doing like Guardians of the Galaxy, we'll say, well, you don't need to know who these guys are. Guardians of the Galaxy made a lot of money. Guardians of the Galaxy made a lot of money because it was the 9th or 10th film in a multi-billion-dollar carriage that was already running. So you should use those Z-listers or B-listers or unknowns, because if you walk into the Marvel offices before 2008 and your first project is the talking tree and the talking raccoon, you're probably on your way to catering and you're going to stay there. So, but when you do it after you've made, hit after hit after hit, you can now take these unknown characters and intertwine them with the Iron Mans, with the Thors, and which is exactly what they did. See, so Marvel did it alongside of, DC did it instead of, and that's what killed DC. But I
kind of feel like DC is like doing that even now, because here's the thing: is like you haven't this new universe so far does not have legs yet. We don't know if it's popular enough to get to that point, and I feel like they should have at least started with like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash. At least start.
That's the way I would have done it.
And then do like Creature Commandos, Guy Gardner, or whatever project you want to do.
I don't know the premise of his story though, because he could bring all those out. The thing about this is he, from a business standpoint, the general public knows the Trinity. You could go out on any street corner and Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and everybody in the world who's never picked up a comic is going to know who those characters are. So I think from a business standpoint, the reason I disagree with starting out with some of the characters he started out, I don't believe that DC Studios or James Gunn has the kind of time to build like he wants to build.
No, they do
no
not.
fault of his own. To no fault of his own.
No.
He doesn't run the company. If the stockholders, if David Zaslav had a meeting when he first hired James Gunn and launched his universe and said, you know what, first movie, we're going to make a whole bunch of money and all you guys do is open up your bags and the money's going to jump in. If he had that conversation, they're in trouble. If he had the common sense conversation and say, this is where we're at, Superman, the James Gunn Superman may lose us a little bit of money, but it is the bedrock we need to establish. If he had an honest conversation with these hedge fund guys, then we're in a good place for a while. If we didn't, the ground under him may not be solid. And you're talking about building a skyscraper on quicksand.
Well,
so
you also,
I would have gone with the heavy hitters to establish it, but it's not my company.
Well, you also factor in the fact that of WB's other monetary issues with like the $9 billion and like them constantly losing money to a certain degree, whether or not it's big or not, they could just lop it off and say, we don't have the money to support this.
Well, that's okay. If that's actually could happen, because if you look at Game of Thrones, House of the Dragons, and Game of Thrones is much more of a flagship IP than DC is currently. It's
That's
massive.
true.
They cut costs in corners, and it affected the quality of Game of Thrones, House of Dragons season 2. It literally changed what that show was. So if your flagship show doesn't get everything you have, when you have a flagship show and you have something like Game of Thrones, you find the money. Something else gets canceled. You find something on HBO Max or whatever to cut so that Game of Thrones, because of the 52% of your male demographic that show has demonstrated, you find a way. And when they couldn't find a way to not have an adverse effect on House of the Dragon, the biggest show that they currently have right now, that tells you that, like I said, if people think that these situations won't affect the DCU, which is why I'm not all in, I think James Gunn is a tremendous talent. But here's the thing. I graduated from DC University, and on my diploma, it says don't believe in shit until the shit is in front of you.
Yeah, I know.
I just don't have the kind of time to invest into something and to have it end up on a road to nowhere. Now, I'm still a fan. I'm still in, but I'm not the guy at ringside with the sign anymore. I'm the guy at home with the remote still rooting for you. It's just that, I just don't want to go through that again right now. And now, years from now, if it all sticks, and guess what? I have nothing to lose by not investing in it. I can jump on the bandwagon. But right now, I don't know where for legit reasons that have nothing to do with DCU or James Gunn. I don't know who's going to be running the company. And if that person comes in with a vision, that vision is going to supersede everything else. You're not going to tell me somebody's going to spend the money and borrow the money and get financial goodie and pitch everybody in his office on this vision and then come in and inherit someone else. Now, if it's just a penny pincher, a Carl Icahn, or somebody who just buys and trades and all that and doesn't care, then yeah, maybe. But I have to see that first, and I have to hear. Right now, James Gunn is he's got a 10-year plan. He's coming to the end next year of a 4-year contract. So it's that's like a coach or a free agent. You come out and tell me that James Gunn is under a clad iron contract, and no matter what happens, then maybe I can come in because it's not going to get thrown away. But it's not going to happen that way. You know why? Because if they're prepping the company for a sale, I don't care how much I love James Gunn. I don't want you signing anybody long term that I have to inherit. I don't want you signing the guy making the hot dogs downstairs for a long term contract, because you know what? I might not want to keep that guy. And you're messing with the value of my company by sticking me with contracts that I'm going to have to buy out, which is exactly what the clowns who did this before. When Warner Brothers and Discovery were talking about their when they were talking about the merger, everything that DC was working on should have been put in abeyance. It should have put it on hold. Not people trying to rush forward and trying to prove to the new ownership that, hey, look, I can still produce stuff. No, because what ended up happening? Write-offs ended up happening. Cancellations ended up happening. Batgirl, which should have never even been a thing.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Should have never even been a thing. There should have never been a Batgirl to cancel. But that's why they were getting bought out. Poor decision making. Jan and the Gleek, the monkey, the Wonder Twins, that was on the table for.
Why did that even get greenlit? Is what I want to know.
Blue Beetle. I mean, all these things right now that weren't going to generate. You should have let you're mixing around these movies. Flash doesn't go last now. Aquaman does. You basically, and then you tell people, by the way, we're going in this new direction. So you're basically spending $1.2 billion to market 4 movies that are pretty much left on the road dead, and that nobody's going to go see, and they're going to go see in streaming.
Yeah.
So that kind of mentality, the new guy, whoever it is, if they're buying Warner Brothers Discovery, if once we get over to the 50% mark, you need to fucking stop. Whatever you're working on right now, I need it to stop. If you're in production, Superman, all that, keep going with that. That's what. But everything else, I don't want you greenlighting shit. I don't want you greenlighting the changing of the toilet paper in the men's room without talking to me first, because you're going to do some shit that I have to come in and be the bad guy. Zaslav has been a knucklehead, but some of the stuff he's had to get rid of are things should have never happened. Acme versus Coyote, you've been losing money in the animation division since the fucking 90s, and you greenlit a $70 million cartoon. And what tells you that shouldn't have ever happened is when they put it up for sale, just for the $70 million that they spent on it, nobody wanted to pay them that money.
Yeah, it's
Everybody
true.
wanted to lowball them. That tells you got some shit that you should have never greenlit. So that's probably what could happen here. It's like I said, but if it's just like I said, will he be the golf guy, who just plays golf all day and he looks at his phone and my stocks are up good, and he clicks off and goes back to his other 18 holes, then the status quo might stay. But there's a good chance that, like I said, if you're going to gather up all this money and you're looking at the potential of these IPs, you're going to want to take your stab at it.
So I mean, it's poor management from Zaslav anyway, because from the get-go, he's had poor management dealing with across the board, whether it's film, TV show, animation, video games, you name it, everything. Like in terms of video games, he banked on Suicide Squad to be a big success after Hogwarts Legacy, and I'm just like, really, a live service thing? And then you say to everyone, "Oh, it's a flop." I'm just like, no shit, Sherlock. You kind of show this.
Well, they killed the Suicide. They killed that brand though.
Yeah, they killed
that brand. I can't blame all that on him. Like I said, some of the shit he's got shit on his fingers about.
Yeah,
another movie that should have never been made. Harley Quinn and the Fantabulous, whatever
yes.
that was.
Yeah,
that hurt her brand. That movie bombing hurt her brand. The Suicide Squad, even though I enjoyed the movie, that lost the company $51 million.
Yeah.
And then they came up with the excuses of, it was released in COVID. Godzilla, I promoted both movies. Godzilla versus Kong made a crap ton of money.
Fast and the Furious came out during COVID.
You made a movie with throwaway characters that literally half of which died as the credits of their names were being rolled. They were killing these characters, and then you expected people to come out and go see it. And I thought Suicide Squad was a fine movie. It got released in August of 2021 when we had a vaccine in play. Godzilla versus Kong was released when people were still dying by 1,000, 1,500 a day. So, yeah.
And please,
go ahead.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey just a Deadpool 2 ripoff? I mean, look at the script. Like, think about it. Like, it is word for word, bar for bar.
It's R-rated. She's kind of going fourth wall breaking and all that. Plus, they butcher Stephanie Brown. It's all
Stephanie
there.
Right, I thought that was Cassandra Cain.
Sandra Cain.
Whichever one. I get confused. There's so many Batgirls. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the thing is like I said, you could have probably done that with any other company. You can't do that with a company where you have Superman and Witness Protection Program, where the last time you saw Batman was in cameos, where you don't have a proper Wonder Woman out there doing anything. When you led people, when you started the party with these, it's like if I invite you to a party and you come in and there's prime rib at the table and everything else. And before you sit down at the table, I say, wait, don't sit there yet. And I take all that prime rib and I come out with some mayonnaise sandwiches. Your response is going to be exactly what you think it should be. You led people on with this, and then you gave them the C-listers, like I said, in lieu of instead of alongside. And that's the problem with Harley Quinn. Nobody, where's Batman? Every time you give me one of these B-listers and Z-listers, my mind goes back to where's Superman? Where's Batman? Where's the Flash? Where are all these characters? I don't have to ask that if you're doing it right. I never had to ask that in Marvel until recently. Marvel didn't struggle until they started promoting the B-listers to places where they don't belong. not doing the characters. Fine, I enjoyed some of these shows, but once you blew your wad and your main game was gone, dead, or aged out, you didn't have another plan in place soon enough. And like I said, they're one A-list movie away from nobody even talking about the last 2 or 3 years. You think when Fantastic Four comes out, people are going to be giving a fuck about the Marvels? No.
No.
Doomsday comes out, people are going to be like,
look at what happened when Deadpool and Wolverine came out. Everyone's like, Marvel's back.
Yeah, and that's like, one movie doesn't save you, but a trend does. And like I said, you have a trend of A-listers. People come in for your A-listers. Your A-listers are the sun to your solar system. If you want to push a B-lister, that's fine. Make sure you're doing it with the support of that A-lister. DC didn't do that, and they went through years without doing that. So by the time that the video game came out, why am I buying that? You've devalued the IP. Nobody cares. You have to have excitement and regard. They're going to end up having to learn. I don't know how this is going to turn out with James Gunn, to be honest with you. If it fails, I don't think it has anything to do with him. I don't think it should be a blight on his career. But I think you took a job in a company that is on shaky ground. And one of the reasons is the handling of the IP. You're never going to have any winners. You're always going to have 50 or 60, whatever, or we're going to pick a side, and that's fine. What the company needs to do is make sure, though, if the 50%, 60% that picks James Gunn's side, great. I'm greedy. I want that other 40%. What can I do? What kind of Superman can I put somewhere on a different platform to get that money? Because right now, Batman, you put Batman anywhere on screen, it's minimum $400 million. Minimum.
At least.
That's before I even hear about who's in it, who's the enemy, who's the villain. Your minimum, you're talking about $400 million. And there has yet to be a proper Batman. If you Gotham, I will throw up on my camera. There has yet to be a proper modern day Batman contemporary TV series, and I think there should be, regardless to who's doing what, and on a movie theater. Like I said, don't call your customers can figure it out. Your customers will be able to figure it out, and if they're not, that means they're too stupid to be buying your product, and I don't think that's the case. So,
and I'd argue Gotham was more of a Gotham Central or Gotham PD show more than anything. They just but you have to get behind these things spiritually, and they just don't. They just don't have the people. Like I said, DC is not dead. Warner Brothers is not dead. It's just not going to be brought to the promised land by the current people that are currently there.
No, it's because here's the thing. It's nothing like you said. I just want to echo what you said, William. There's nothing wrong with the DC characters. It's not like the IP is flawed. It's just the way they are using the IP that's wrong.
Yeah, there's no vision. There's no vision. They're commodities to them. They're commodities, and they're not instruments. See, with Marvel, what Kevin Feige sees Marvel's IPs as, since he's been back in the box, he sees them as instruments to tell a story. I don't think DC's executives ever looked at DC that way. I don't think they do so now. I think James Gunn does, but once again, when you look at the power of the hierarchy when it comes to Warner Brothers Discovery, you have David Zaslav. You actually have a guy ahead of him, the chairman of the board, the guy who can call votes. You have him, and then you have the stockholders, and then somewhere down in the middle, you have James Gunn. Yeah, he answers directly to David Zaslav, but that position, that person can change out, and B, the chairman of the board, if he sees the stock sitting at 760 or 770 for too long, he can call a vote. He can oust the CEO. So not only are you levels below the final decision maker, those decision makers could change in the current climate that you're in now. So I don't think I just don't know what's going to happen with it, and it's really hard. And then I get the people who are like, "Oh, it's a year away. We got plenty of time to do this." No, you don't. When you don't have the benefit of the doubt, you're dealing with a lit fuse from day one, minute one. And I don't think that they've done. Be honest with you, the company has done the things that get me to change my perception about the DCU.
No,
and everybody's telling me, "Well, it's too far out. It's only to." I went to Comic-Con and stood right in Hall H and watched them roll out Fantastic Four with a trailer before they started filming anything. They had a trailer, a concept trailer that they had shot for Comic-Con. They had the actors come out. That movie gets released 2 weeks after Superman gets released and hadn't begun filming. They were literally getting on jets to leave. So that's how you do it. You get me excited about this thing, and you let that build and build until it's time. And, I just don't see that.
Well, even look at the way Hall H reacted when Robert Downey Jr. came out as Dr. Frickin' Doom. The place exploded.
Yeah, and when we saw William's video on Twitter, that made me laugh. By the way, because you were sitting down and you had to stand up,
Yeah.
because
It's an
that
asshole.
it was crazy. I was just like, I really felt bad for you.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
I really felt bad for you because you were there all day, I reckon,
Yeah.
at San Diego Comic Con, and
Yeah,
like, you probably
yeah.
spent
That's a stream
hours
on
there.
its own. Oh my god.
That's gotta be like rough, dude. But I admire your dedication, bro. I admire your dedication.
We ain't doing that
Yeah.
shit next year without a press pass, because the whole story leading up to that, it wasn't just a day. It was the day before. It was up all night because my bed broke, so I had nowhere to sleep. So I'm like, I might as well go down there. But no, Marvel, in my opinion, got you excited about something that's coming out in July, whereas Superman is in the can. And I'm no more excited about that than anything. I'm not saying it's going to be a bad movie. I have to wait and see. But when you're DC, when you're Warner Brothers, there's no such thing as wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
If you wait until I get within the vicinity of your movie to start giving me hyped about it, given the history, fair or unfair, I think that's dangerous. I think that's just.
What do you think of the Superman suit, the new one?
I don't like it.
Me neither. Thank you.
Like it. I'm a lot of it's going to be preference.
Yeah.
I am of Superman suit being form fitting because Superman's body is the armor, so he really doesn't need those things. I don't like the
He doesn't need knee pads.
Yeah, I like the S not on this. I like that S where it belongs. And,
on the Kingdom, on the actual older Superman for Kingdom Come. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the reason why is because that S isn't just a symbol. It's in context of where he is at in life and what he's walked away from. The color and the vivacious liveliness that comes from the color of Superman in large part has been taken away. His suit is much darker here, but that yellow is gone, and that means something. I'm coming back. I don't want to, but I have to. And it's a reflection of what he's around. And a lot of these costumes that are in here are reflecting that. And that S represents a story in a pivotal era.
It's a specific Superman story that is associated with Kingdom Come for a reason. The other thing that I saw that kind of turned me off was
when I see this.
Yeah.
When I see this, I don't like it because Superman and Authority. Here we go with that as now. At least it's black there, but that symbol was part of that story. That story was part of an era. I would have, I don't hate it. I like the look of it. I just don't like it there,
Well, the other thing is, like, I got turned off the minute I saw Guy Gardner's suit and it's like all white.
You lost me at Guy Gardner.
That too. But I'm like, even with that, any Green Lantern, first off, no Guardian is going to let a Green Lantern do the bidding.
Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
In all fairness, though, those suits that they were wearing in that clip probably not their final suits. That's probably
definitely.
Yeah, I'm back. I lost the internet, but as I was saying, no Guardian is gonna let a Green Lantern do the will of a private corporation. I'm sorry, that ain't happening. And then if he's a Green Lantern, why is most of his suit white?
Well, that's Maxwell Lord. That's because.
Well, I know, but
that's branding.
I'm just like that's. The reason why I'm harping on this, William, is because everywhere I see, even from the actors, they're like, this is very true to the comics. I'm like, okay, where?
No, well,
The only aspect in which that's true to the comics is the fact that JLI was sponsored by Maxwell Lord pre-Infinite Crisis and all that. Other than Maxwell Lord,
I don't think he even sponsored them. I think he was just a liaison.
Well, he was a government guy who was in charge of the funding. So,
okay.
But here's the thing, though. However it comes out, the thing about it is this far into the game, I just don't have anything to say that I'm all in with this yet. I don't have anything that tells me to go away. But given what I've been through before, my diploma from DCU, I that degree told me that you keep your distance because last time you didn't. Last time you went all in, you ended up with a really bad feeling, and that feeling is still there. And I don't want to feel that way about an IP. So I'm going to wait. I mean, we'll promote this movie when it comes out. As far as here goes, I'm pretty sure that Warner Brothers will get with us and we'll do it then. But I would like to go into this, if you're telling me that you're going to sell me a universe, but, I need to feel like I'm buying into one. And and unfortunately for James Gunn, I just can't give. And it's not, I know the old regime is gone, but the new regime has made some questionable decisions. Like I said, the process to get James Gunn as your DC head was embarrassing.
Mhm.
And they were one person. If Todd Phillips or Dan Lin or any of these other guys, that any one of them says yes, we're in a different world. Because remember, those guys turning down a job was even what opened the door for James Gunn. So
yeah, because people forget he was not their first choice. But Cameron
asked,
so much about, if you don't mind, do you think Marvel and DC began to concern with being modern?
When you say that, when they concern with bringing things up to modern or being modern?
I think both. What do you think? In terms of like, maybe let's ask like this: do you think Marvel and DC are too concerned about making their characters like hip and not sticking to like these are the universal versions of the character?
No, because most of the people who will ever go into a movie theater, 3% of the entire movie going audience will ever pick up a comic book, and I hate to say that because I sell.
It's true.
So they don't have to. Captain America: Civil War is fine for that person, even though that's not the story. Yes, you have the basic bare bones of the story, and that's fine. That's all you really need. You're not making it for me. You're not making it for the hardcore, goofball that's wearing the Shazam shirt out in public. So they don't need to do that. I don't think. I don't think they've ever needed to do that because they, sometimes they stick to the story. You're making a movie and not writing a comic, so I'll always give them that allowance. But as far as making them too. You also have to relate to the audience that's buying your stuff too, So you have to, the world around you, these superheroes have to be relatable to the world around us, just like they were in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, or otherwise their juxtaposition on the society is not special. So
well, yeah, and I'm like, that's why I like Zack Snyder's movies, because they were updating. Here's what Superman would be like if he were in the world, and people are like, that's not Superman because he's not happy and cheery and stuff, and I'm like, Superman is not always happy and cheery in the comics. I got news for you.
That's a fanboy problem too. Fans want they want to see the finished story in their head instead of what the creator has been paid to write. They want that. They don't want to see the journey that character goes on to become what he is. And who knows, it might be end up where they're thinking it end up. They don't want to do that. They want the finished product in that's lived in their head since they were a kid. They want that to be with somebody who was hired and paid hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars to create. So rather than let the storytellers tell a story, they want to impose their childhood memories onto modern day realities. And what that does is it makes it harder for them to open their arms to a different version of a character. If they want the finished product after Superman has been everywhere, done everything he's done, and then they want someone's else's era, like Christopher Reeve was the era of Superman when I was 6 years old. I'm a grown fucking man. That doesn't do it for me these days.
Me neither.
You know what? Adam West is Batman. Like I said, I would rather chew off my toes than watch that as my Batman today. You go into different eras, and those eras don't represent everything. It's just a different thing. But that's why, is because it's not a modernization of it. It's that they're reacting to fans who have a specific version in their heads that isn't it anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm like, everyone can be attached to a version of the character that they came into, and that's fine. But I think a lot of people, again, are too attached to that era where they're like, no, that's the only valid version of the character. And I always tell people, I always respond when people say that's not Superman. I'm like, as long as the DC and WB logo is on that comic book or movie or action figure, that's Superman, no matter what you and I say.
Yeah, there's a guy in the chat that said, what were DC doing when they were making the Tobey and Spider-Man movies? They were making the Batman movies.
Yeah,
the Christopher Nolan Batman,
which did really well for them. So there you go. Yeah. But it's like, again, I feel like, to your point, because here's the thing, I think, going back to what you said about the multiverse, and we'll wrap up. I think the way that DC should be using the multiverse, to your point, is use alternate versions of the characters, like have Matt Reeves, have Superman and Lois, have the Snyderverse, have the Gunverse, as opposed to actually having a story that talks about the multiverse, because I feel like that's kind of burnt out the audience on the multiverse idea with Marvel.
Well, that's what Marvel does. Here's the main difference between DC and Marvel. And when it comes to the multiverse, for Marvel is a tool to tell a linear story. No matter where you're going with this, even no matter how many universes you have, you're ultimately going to end up with a linear story with a sacred timeline. So it's just a plot device to tell a story. With DC, it's a way of stellar storytelling. It is the company. It is embedded in their DNA. It was from 1938 all the way up to 1986. And even then, you are something and you can't deny it when you keep basically going back to it. We are literally going back to multiverses again and Elseworlds again, because that is the strength of DC. It's not the strength of Marvel. Having different versions of these characters that have catered to your grandfather, your father, and your kids, that is a strength that DC has always had. And when you take away that strength, you start becoming another company. So yeah, it's the difference between what you're seeing Marvel do the last 2 years and all the way into Secret Wars. They're using the multiverse to eventually get to a certain place. DC is that place. That DC, when it was being done right, always had a version of Batman that was here, a Superman that was here, Gray Temple guy that appeared in Action Comics #1, as opposed to the Silver Age one, that got lined up once comic books started selling it. Because remember, after World War II, comic book sales tanked, and then they rose back up in the 60s. So.
Yeah. So, Jay Heath, Talati, do you have one more question for William before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah.
So because you are a comic book store owner, my question to you is, what is it like when it comes? Obviously, you told me this before. When customers come and you give them, you give them a list to read, the comics to check out.
Yep, they're sitting up here.
Yeah,
they're literally.
Has anybody that has been like a normal reader has actually come up to you and say, look, what would you recommend checking out, not as a new reader, but as a normal reader to go down the avenue, to give them, to jump in and say, look, hey, this book is really cool to check out. And,
it's going to be the same. It'll be pretty much, the books may change, but it's going to be the same strategy. So these are why these sit up here. So if they're coming in, they're not a collector, but they want to get in, but they are aware of the IP. They're going to know who Batman is, but they don't want to jump in. Detective Comics is on 1,100 issues. That's intimidating, right? But you want to get in somewhere, right? I can give you Dark Knight Returns with the greatest Batman story ever told, in my opinion. All right, anybody can get into this. The basic idea of Batman is in this books, and the basic idea of what DC Universe is in this book. You can start them off with that if they're going to Batman. If they are somebody who is still hasn't picked up a comic, but they've seen the Batman movies and they've definitely seen the Batman, I give them this storyline, Court of Owls, and these smaller things, these smaller compact we started to make. This gets them the entire story, and it gets it to them for dirt cheap. This is $10. $10, they get an entire story. Where they go from there is up to them, but there's enough here in Batman for them to go here. So you start with that right there. What the best Superman story in existence for me is Kingdom Come.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I have that book.
Is a Superman series. They don't have to know what Elseworlds are, because this is an Elseworlds title. They don't have to be too much connected to the IP. When you give people these things, you're giving them the basic idea of what the character is. And every character in here, you have the basic idea. You can get into the details in the monthly comics, but this gets a person walking through the door. That gets them going. It gives them.
In a nutshell, here's who the character is.
Exactly. A lot of the Netflix generation who are not superhero fans, but they are open to collecting comics. Netflix is working on season 2 of Sandman. These 2 books literally have been redone with the Netflix logo to let you know season 1 lines up with this, and then you got Season of the Mist, things like that. So you have a couple of different. I've had families come in that had all these demographics within the same people that are in their vehicle. So you give them stuff that gives them the basic idea of the character. It doesn't have to connect to 1,000 different things. They can do that. That's the eventual. That's what you want them to do. But my motto here, and I used to have it hanging above the door, is don't sell somebody an item, sell them a story. Once you sell them a story, they will go where they need to go.
Exactly.
So
now,
that answered that.
Now let me ask you this: what would you recommend for Wonder Woman?
For who?
Wonder Woman.
Dead Earth.
Dead Earth. Okay, there you go.
I can see that.
That's
a
good one.
Yeah, Dead Earth. Dead
That's
Earth.
a good one.
Dead Earth is a universal premise. You don't need to know who the character is, but it gives you a basic understanding that is a recognizable version of Wonder Woman as a warrior. That's all you really need to know, and from there you can go to different other versions of them. There are other storylines that I can recommend, but that entire tells them jumping into an investment that they're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
They want something to familiarize. They come in there like Deadpool. Deadpool's on 100 issues right now. I can give them, something, that can compact. Wolverine. You just watched Wolverine in the movie. All right, so I start you out with reprints of these because I don't want to. I want your money, but I don't want to bankrupt you. So I start you out with one of these or this whole series or the trade paperback that's over there. Things like that. You saw Elektra in the movie, right? So I'm going to give you Elektra Assassin. Because that gives you a good widespread of whatever that character is. You like Blade? Ugh, I'm sorry to hear that, but there's a lot of things I can get you for Blade, but Blade in the comics is not like Blade in the movie. He's not that feature type of star like that. But there's a lot of different things in there, especially when a lot of it is coming from the movies. I have an As Seen on TV section that has all this in it. So, it lets them walk in and they feel more comfortable in that because they recognize these IPs and they're laid out in the way that they saw them. So, they may not be the biggest. The Iron Man to them is Tony Stark. Or not Tony Stark. It's Robert Downey Jr. That's Iron Man to them. They connect that to Iron Man. But you know what? I can get you into a couple issues of Armor Wars or something like that. You don't have to buy 200 issues. But trade paperbacks are usually the way to connect with a customer. Because it gives them value. I did. Yeah, it gives them value, gives them volume for a good price.
Yeah. How about you, Jaheet?
Oh, okay. As for me, first of all, big fan. Thank you so much for coming on to the show with us. I just want to reiterate that one more time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. But my last question of the night would be, as a retailer, what helps keep you invested in the industry for better or for worse, regardless of mismanagement of the IP?
Because my point of view is always going to be my entire life of it. Because at any given time, it was handled really great. Yeah. I mean, before comic book movies, when I first opened in the mid 90s, comic books were tanking. But I still found stories. I still found things to sell. For me, it was more about putting myself in a space that I could surround myself with my people and the people that like the things that's where I really started. It didn't start for money for me. I started as I was 18 years old and I started the business. And my main thing is I wanted to replicate the feeling that I had when I was growing up in LA and San Bernardino, where every day, I came in and I sat amongst my geeks. That's pretty much what was the start of it was. So whenever the industry does what it does, like you're asking, I go back to why I started it to begin with. Did I start it because I wanted to be rolling in the dough, or did I start it because these are the conversations I want to have?
Heck
so
yeah.
It always comes back to that.
And David has one more question. Have you ever given a brand new reader an indie book to start? In other words, non-Marvel and DC.
All the time. All the time. Spawn, The Crow. There's a lot of indie. There's a lot of stuff from Boom Studios. Once you start talking to people and you do go through a qualification process, you start talking to things and they're in your space right now. So they're open to a comic book. So you got that checked by. Well, what kind? What are they wearing? If I come in and you're wearing you're wearing goth type stuff, there's certain things I might ask you. I might not assume, but I might ask you what kind of stuff you're into. I would give. There's a lot of indie stuff out there that you can give somebody. It all depends on the conversation that you have with them. If a lot of it won't even have anything to do with comic books. If I have a guy that comes in here and he's wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt and we spark up a 9 Inch Nails conversation, within 10-15 minutes I'm going to have a good shot at knowing what I can give that guy. And a lot of it's going to be like kitchen sink press stuff, old caliber press stuff, some of the old black and white stuff, some of the older Dark Horse stuff that was out. Some of the true indie stuff, maybe some local stuff, but yeah, I've turned a lot of, I put a lot of indie stuff in people's hands because a lot of it is written by people like them. So.
Yep. That works. All right. So we're going to wrap it up. So William, where can one find you and what have you got coming on your channel?
You can find me on our you can Google the Sci Fi Center and pretty much everything pops up there. But if you would like to go to the channel, it's youtube.com/@the Sci Fi Center, all one word. No separations there. And I'll jump back on the Voxer stream in a couple of minutes, and then I'll have our show, our TGI show, probably around 11:30 tonight. Tomorrow we're doing a watch party for a double feature for Prometheus and Alien Covenant. We're going to be watching those back to back. And then we have our anchor show, which is our Saturday overnight live show, to where we roll all of this up into one big show. And then we bring in our circus, which is our chat, and we bring them in and we talk to them. But and then Sunday we just do our standard Sunday night live stream.
Heck yeah. And I look forward to watching it. So everyone stay heroic. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to
you skipped
God,
me.
So it's okay. Jay, where can we find you and what we got coming on your channel? Go ahead.
Anyway, you can find me at Jay Blaze on YouTube or Jay75 on Twitter or X. Either or. Also, I did have a gaming stream, Mass Effect, where I go for the whole trilogy. But due to scheduling, you're not going to get Mass Effect this weekend. But you will get some other projects I've been putting on the back burner to make up for Mass Effect Saturday. So y'all should be good on that. Anyway, I want to thank our guest, Sci Fi Center, so much for taking the time to come on to the show tonight. And I hope you guys had fun.
How about you, Taladia?
As for me, I've got like the Batman Cape Crusader live reactions on Sunday with myself and Jared, episode 4. So I can't wait to react to that. And then next week, we're going to be covering Forever Evil with Jared and Bianca from Myself and Comics. And it will be part 1, I believe, of 3. Is it 3 issues, Jared?
I think so. It should be in terms of the Justice League issues. It should be 3.
Okay, so 3 issues of Forever Evil. So we'll be doing that. My first time reading it, so we'll be going through it, having a discussion, and then we'll be talking about more comics as well. And then as well, I'll be doing some here and there bits and bobs, going around different streams. I'll probably try and get William's stream again. And William, thanks for coming on again onto Jared's channel,
dude. It's been a long time coming.
This has been it's been a great pleasure for you to come on and to just talk comics and to talk about business with you, because it's really insightful.
Thank you.
I hit the wrong button.
I do it all the time, dude.
It's all good. All right, stay heroic, everyone. Bye bye.
Excelsior!